How do you look into the eyes of someone you once loved and pretend you're just a stranger now? That question hit me like a slow wave the moment I saw him, standing under the old archway of the university library, his black coat catching the winter light, the same nervous smile playing at his lips. My heart didn't race, it paused, like it needed time to understand whether this was real or just one of the many daydreams I'd buried under rose petals and coffee grounds. Ethan? He turned, and just like that, a decade of silence broke into 1,000 memories. There was no dramatic music, no tight embrace, just silence and that look, the kind of look you give when you see a ghost from the best years of your life. I wish I could tell you this story ends in a fairy tale, that we fell back into each other's arms and made up for all the years we lost. But life doesn't work like that. Love isn't a perfect circle. It's a trail of pages we forget to read until much, much later. What happens when the person who once made you feel infinite is no longer yours to hold? What do you do when your heart whispers, "I still love you," but your life says you can't? Stay with me. This story is not just about love. It's about timing, memory, letting go, and choosing a different kind of forever. If you enjoy emotional stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to John Stories channel for more beautiful narratives every day. Let's begin. Claire hadn't meant to visit the university that day. She didn't wake up with a plan, but something about the morning light, the way it painted the frost on her garden roses, felt like an echo from a time long gone. So she took the bus. With her son at school and her freelance article already sent in, the quiet day was hers. She wore a cream-colored scarf her mother had knitted last Christmas. It matched the warmth she tried to carry through even the most uncertain days. Her job wasn't stable. She wrote lifestyle blogs for small publishers, helped a neighbor arrange handmade wedding gifts, taught kids how to scrapbook on weekends. Her life was modest. Her heart wasn't. The university campus hadn't changed much. The same bricks, the same echoes of hurried footsteps and laughter bouncing off ivy-covered walls. Claire walked slowly, as if afraid to disturb the ghosts of who she used to be. 20 years ago, she would have been hurrying to class with coffee in one hand and Ethan's hoodie wrapped around her shoulders. Now, she just wrapped her arms around herself. She didn't expect to see him, Ethan Mason. He stood tall in a tailored charcoal coat, a leather folder tucked beneath his arm. His once boyish face had hardened into the kind of handsomeness that came with age and too many responsibilities. But his eyes, they were exactly the same. He looked up from his phone. Their eyes met. Time stuttered. "Claire," he said, blinking as if unsure she was real. She smiled, small, cautious. "Hey, stranger." Neither of them moved at first. It was the kind of moment you don't want to touch, like a snowflake on warm skin, fragile, fleeting. "I didn't know you'd be here," he said, stepping forward. "I didn't know you'd remember me," she replied, teasing gently. It was a shield, of course. She remembered him too well. Every song he once hummed while cooking pasta in their shared dorm kitchen. Every letter he wrote in the margins of her textbooks. The way he used to look at her, like she was the answer to a question he hadn't asked yet. "I'm here for a contract meeting with the board," Ethan said, glancing awkwardly toward the administration building. "They're expanding a tech wing. I'm involved." Of course he was. Ethan had always been ambitious. Now he was a CEO, married, father of 2 if she remembered correctly from an alumni email she never replied to. "And you?" he asked. "I was just remembering." She gestured vaguely. They laughed softly. That strange laugh you share with someone who knows you too well, but hasn't seen you in years. They walked. Past the old fountain, past the bench where they first kissed after pulling an all-nighter, past the library where they once held hands under a desk while pretending to study. Claire glanced at him. He looked tired beneath the polished exterior, the kind of tired that didn't come from lack of sleep, but from emotional wear, the weight of expectations, of being needed but not understood. "Your wife must be proud," she said, without quite knowing why. He didn't answer immediately. "She appreciates the work I do," he finally said. His voice was steady, but not warm. "She manages the home. We don't talk much, to be honest. It's mostly logistics now." Claire didn't press. She knew what it was like to speak of things that were technically whole, but emotionally hollow. Her marriage had unraveled quietly, like a sweater pulled too many times, in too many places. Her son, now 7, was her anchor. He reminded her to laugh, to paint messy pictures, to believe in Lego castles and kitchen forts. "You?" Ethan asked. "You look peaceful." Claire smiled at that. Divorced, broke, and bizarrely happy. He looked at her for a long second. "I'm not surprised." It was meant as a compliment, and somehow it made her want to cry. They stopped near the greenhouse. She pointed to the climbing roses along the wall. "I still grow those. Pink ones, like the ones we stole for our dorm room." He chuckled. That plant never forgave us. Silence. A good silence. And then he said it. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we didn't let go?" She swallowed hard. "All the time," she admitted. It wasn't the answer she meant to give, but it was the only true one. Sometimes life doesn't break us apart with one giant crack. It's a series of hairline fractures, job offers in different cities, parental pressures, misunderstood silences. They had drifted, not because they stopped loving, but because they thought love would wait forever. They sat on a bench. Claire pulled out a small notebook from her bag, the same kind she used in college. The pages were filled with half-written poems, recipe notes, and quotes she found comforting. She said, "I write things I can't say out loud." He nodded, eyes fixed on her hands. "Claire," he whispered, "I miss you." Her heart clenched. "I miss who we were," she replied gently. Ethan's words hung in the cold air like breath, visible, real, and impossible to take back. "I miss you." Claire didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She simply looked at him, her eyes soft but grounded, as if she had prepared for this moment without knowing it. "I miss who we were," she replied gently, tucking the notebook back into her bag. "But I'm not her anymore." "I know," he said, rubbing his thumb against the leather strap of his watch. "Neither am I." They both looked out across the courtyard, where a group of students laughed over coffee and phones and the kind of urgency only 20-year-olds feel. A girl in a denim jacket ran up behind a boy, covering his eyes. He laughed and spun her around, their backpacks clattering. Claire smiled. "That used to be us," Ethan said. "No," she corrected with a quiet smile. "We never needed to sneak up on each other. We always saw each other coming." There was something so piercing about her words, he had to look away. In the pause that followed, Claire glanced at him, really looked at him. The lines on his face weren't deep, but they were earned. His hands looked stronger, older. His voice more measured, but there was a heaviness to him, like a man who had everything he once wished for and none of what he truly needed. "Do you love her?" Claire asked, the question barely audible. He took too long to answer. "She loves what I provide, but not me, not really." Claire nodded. Not because she agreed, but because she understood. When her own marriage fell apart, it wasn't from shouting or infidelity, it was silence. Two people passing each other in the hallway like shadows. Days filled with bills and school drop-offs, and no room left for being seen. She had loved deeply before, and that love had faded, quietly, like a photograph left in the sun. Now she gave her heart to smaller things. Her son's laughter, the smell of cinnamon bread in the oven, the way her roses bent toward the light. They rose from the bench together, walked slowly toward the old lecture hall, each step feeling like pages being turned. "Remember this room?" he asked, pushing open the heavy wooden door. She laughed. "You used to fall asleep in the third row every Monday morning." He smiled. "Only because your voice reading notes was better than any lullaby." They stepped inside. The seats were empty. The air still smelled of chalk and old wood. Claire walked down to the front and ran her fingers along the podium. "It's strange," she said. "This place made me feel small when I was young. Now it feels like a part of me." "Maybe we grow into our memories," Ethan said softly. Claire turned toward him. He was holding something. "I found this in a drawer last year," he said. It was a faded photograph, creased at the corners. The two of them in front of the campus fountain. He wore a flannel shirt, she had daisies in her hair. They looked unbearably happy. "I almost threw it away," he admitted, "but something stopped me." Claire took the photo with trembling hands. She stared at it for a long time, then slid it into her notebook without a word. "Thank you," she whispered. Outside, the sky had turned a shade of gray that made the lamplights flicker on too early. It wasn't raining yet, but the air had that sharp smell, the kind that foretells a storm. "I should go," Claire said. He nodded. They stood by the gates, neither moving. "I have meetings in the city next week. If you ever—" She raised a hand gently, stopping him, not unkindly, but firmly. "I want to, but we can't." He looked down. She stepped closer. "What we had, it was real. And what we feel now, it's still real. But the life we've built apart matters too. Your children, my son, the things we've promised to other people." "I'm not happy, Claire," he said, almost desperately. She touched his face lightly with her fingertips. "But you're still needed." He closed his eyes. They stood there for a moment that didn't feel like a goodbye, but more like a full circle. "Then, what do we do?" he asked, voice cracking ever so slightly. Claire smiled through a tightening throat. "We carry each other, in memory, in quiet, in late-night thoughts and letters never sent." He nodded. "And maybe," she added, stepping back, "we become each other's compass. Not to return, but to remember who we once were, when we need it most." The first drops of rain began to fall, soft, like apologies. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "I bought this years ago, for no reason, but I always thought of you when I saw it." She opened it slowly. Inside was a simple charm bracelet with a single silver rose. Claire's eyes filled. "It's beautiful." "Handmade," he said. Of course it was.
She closed the box and placed it gently into her bag. "Thank you." As she turned to go, he called after her. "Claire." She paused. You still make the world feel softer. She didn't reply. She just walked into the rain, into the life she chose, into the warmth of her son's waiting arms and her mother's quiet strength. She didn't look back, and neither did he. Because some love stories don't need a second chapter to stay alive. They just need a safe place to live in memory. They stayed in touch occasionally, a photo liked, a message sent, a postcard from a city neither had ever visited. They never met again, but when Claire watered her roses or made tea on Sunday mornings, she'd sometimes hear his laugh echo quietly through the house. And when Ethan stood alone in his office late at night, he'd open a drawer and see that old photo and smile. You know, not every love story ends with two people walking into the sunset together, and perhaps it doesn't have to. Sometimes maturity means choosing responsibility over desire, choosing peace over passion, and knowing that love, true love, can exist without possession. It can live in gestures, memories, and quiet promises whispered to yourself on rainy days. It had only been 4 days since they saw each other again. 4 days, and yet everything felt quieter now. Louder, too, in the strangest ways, as if life had peeled back its usual rhythm and replaced it with long pauses, strange hesitations, and sudden memories that snuck in uninvited. Claire found herself lingering longer in the garden, her fingers running slowly over the petals of her blooming roses. She had pruned them just last week, yet they seemed to reach higher now, as if sensing some unnamed change in the air. She hadn't spoken to Ethan since they parted at the university gate. No calls, no texts, no accidental emails. But his presence lingered, in the empty chair beside her at the dinner table, in the songs that played on the old kitchen radio, in the scarf she wore, even though it wasn't that cold anymore. Her mother noticed. "You've been writing more," she said casually over tea. Claire smiled faintly. "Sometimes I have too many words in my head. Writing's the only way to not drown in them." Her mother gave her that look, the one that said, "I know, I won't push." That night, Claire opened her laptop and stared at a blank blog post. She typed, then deleted, typed again. Finally, she wrote, "Some people leave and you don't notice. Others return and suddenly, everything inside you remembers who you used to be." She didn't publish it. She just saved it to drafts. Meanwhile, Ethan sat alone in the back seat of his town car, returning from yet another investor dinner. The city lights blurred past like streaks of memory, gold, blue, red. Noise wrapped around him, but none of it reached. He should have felt satisfied. The contract had been signed. His team was ecstatic. His calendar was booked solid for the next 3 months. Everything was functioning. And yet, he glanced at his phone. No notifications, no missed messages, just the quiet temptation of reaching out. He didn't. Instead, he opened his notes app and typed, "I used to believe love had to be loud, but the quiet kind, that's the one that stays." He stared at it for a while, then locked the screen.
Over the next week, they lived their lives on parallel frequencies, thinking of each other, missing the silence they once shared, but honoring the one they chose now. Claire took her son to the park. She laughed at his jokes, wiped mud from his shoes, and made pancakes shaped like animals just to hear him giggle. But every now and then, when he wasn't looking, she'd glance at the charm bracelet on the shelf. She didn't wear it. She didn't need to. It was enough just knowing it was there. Ethan spent more time with his children. He asked questions he hadn't asked in months, sat through a full ballet rehearsal for his daughter, even though his phone buzzed endlessly, helped his son build a science project, and didn't once mention the company merger. He tried. He tried to be present. But presence, he realized, wasn't about just being in the room. It was about who filled the space in your thoughts when everything went quiet. That was still Claire. And yet, slowly, something shifted. Not the longing, that stayed, but the urgency faded. They began exchanging messages, tentative, light. Claire sent a photo of her garden in full bloom. The pink ones survived the frost, stubborn little things. Ethan replied with a photo of his coffee mug on the windowsill, sunrise behind it. Looks familiar, still drinking it black. She smiled. No pressure, no promises. Just presence. Steady, soft, safe. They spoke about books, music, their children, their work, and sometimes about nothing at all. They never flirted, never reminisced about kisses or nights in his dorm room. That chapter had closed, but in its place, something gentler bloomed. They shared worry. They shared wonder. They became each other's breath in between responsibilities. 2 weeks after their meeting, Claire sent him a voice note. You know what's funny? I think I loved you more in the past 2 weeks than I ever did in college. Not the kind of love that asks for anything, just the kind that sees you clearly and lets you be. Ethan didn't reply right away. He waited. A day, then 2. On the 3rd night, he finally sent her a message. I think the best thing I can give you now is the freedom to be loved without being held. I don't want to become another weight you have to carry, but I'll always be here in the quiet places. And that's when they both understood. Some people are not meant to arrive at the end of your story, but they are meant to shape it, to remind you who you were before the world told you otherwise. Claire started signing her blog posts with a new tagline. For the ones we keep in memory, not for regret, but for reverence. Her readers noticed. They wrote back with comments like, "This feels like a goodbye that doesn't hurt. It reminds me of someone I haven't spoken to in 10 years. Thank you. I thought I was the only one who carried love in silence." She never mentioned Ethan, but he was there in every comma, and he read every post. One Sunday morning, Claire stood in her backyard, hands deep in the soil, planting new rose seedlings. Her son ran barefoot through the grass, shrieking with joy. Her mother sat nearby with a book and a thermos of tea. She looked around, and for the first time in a while, her heart felt steady. Not because it had stopped missing, but because it had found a place for the missing to live. That same morning, Ethan watched his daughter perform a piano piece in their living room. He applauded, hugged her close, and smiled when she said, "Dad, you actually listened the whole time." He looked out the window and whispered, "I'm trying, Claire." And he meant it. They didn't need daily calls, or grand gestures, or romantic resolutions. They had something else. A quiet friendship, a sacred space, a love that no longer asked to be fulfilled, only remembered. They became each other's witness. The person you send a song to at 2 a.m. without explanation. The one who knows your favorite book without ever asking. The one who doesn't belong in your life, but still belongs to your heart. Claire didn't talk about Ethan much after that. Not to her mother, not to her closest friend, not even in her blog, where she often poured her heart out between posts about homemade lavender soap and watercolor sunsets. But he was there, in the way she paused over a love poem longer than usual, or how she carefully placed the silver rose charm on a shelf above her desk, never wearing it, but never hiding it either. On quiet nights, when her son was asleep and the wind rustled the rose bushes outside her bedroom window, she'd let herself remember, not with regret, but with reverence. Love, after all, isn't always about keeping someone. Sometimes it's about letting them go in the most beautiful way. Somewhere across the city, In a penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view most people would envy, Ethan stood on his balcony, watching the lights flicker below like scattered fireflies. He held a cup of black coffee in his hand, no sugar, just like Claire used to drink hers. His wife was out of town again. His kids were asleep in their rooms, buried in their own worlds of headphones and video games. The house was quiet. Too quiet. He reached into the drawer by his desk and pulled out the notebook. It wasn't hers, but it might as well have been. The pages were filled with his own words now, letters he never sent, thoughts he never shared. On the last page, he had written just one line. "Thank you for loving me when I didn't even know how to love myself." They never became lovers again, but they became something else, something quieter, rarer, and perhaps more sacred. Soulmates in memory, companions in thought. And that was enough. Have you ever experienced a connection like this, where love doesn't need to be loud or even romantic to be real? Do you believe that some people are meant to stay in our hearts, even if they don't stay in our lives? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts on these quiet, powerful connections. Thanks for staying with us until the end. If this story moved you, made you think, consider sharing it with someone who might need it today. Subscribe our channel for more powerful stories about love, self-growth, and human connection. And turn on the bell so you don't miss the next emotional journey.